This video documents my experience with the Pacific Crest Trail. Everywhere the Pacific Crest Trail touches is land with long-living histories of indigenous peoples, tribes, bands, and nations. I want to acknowledge that I have lived most of my life on the traditional homelands of the Duwamish People, in Seattle, where I'm editing this video. It would be disingenuous of me to suggest that I thought about this as much as I probably should have while hiking the PCT in 2014, but it's always possible to learn more about where you are and why you are where you are, and be enriched by and hopefully preserve some of the deeper meaning that's directly tied to the landscape and the people who live in it. In the backcountry, I have found a simple clarity and intuitive engagement with the landscapes of all scales that surround us in an infinity of patchworks. There is always more that beckons us further than we can go. Gateways in the branches, where no path is clear. When I first heard of the idea of a trail that extended hundreds of miles and let you continuously backpack along it, I almost couldn't believe it. It sounded like a way completely out of my regular life and a way into the mystery of landscape that had always compelled me. I dreamt of the trail like that. A few years later, I got my dad to drop me off alone on the Pacific Crest Trail. I had planned this first trip on the trail in the model of a long-distance hike because I had become pretty obsessed with that idea. But after 5 days and 100 miles, I had basically gotten my ass handed to me by backpacking. My heavy pack was killing my shoulders, there were warnings of dangerous snow in the section ahead, not to mention my blistered covered feet, or my upper body completely covered in mosquito bites. But still there was something about the trip that transcended the reasons I had to stop. In the summer of 2009, during my second year in college, I finished a section hike starting where I stopped on my first attempt at White Pass in Washington, down to Crater Lake in Oregon. The month that it took me to walk that 500 miles was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. After this second hike, it got stuck in my head that the only way to be the person I wanted to be was to see if I could do the whole thing at once. A few years after I graduated college, I finally found myself with a job that would let me save up over the winter to do it in the next summer. I trained myself at the gym, trying to strengthen my knees. I had experienced severe pain near the end of my month-long trip, which had lingered on to the point that I could not run for exercise. It was impossible not to imagine that pain coming back and tearing down the dream I had had for all of my adult life. I had studied fine art in college, and after my month-long trip had a burst of productivity. Now, a few years later, I was finishing a large painting that to me would be a kind of celebration of all the life I might live on the trail. The Pacific Crest Trail spans 2,650 miles and typically takes 5 months to through hike. I was practically at first, and then literally living out of my office as it came time to be as ready as I could make myself. Here we are at System Transfer, where I've had my studio and office for the past year and a half or so. Here is all the dried food for my dinners. Calories during the day, one of the essentials, olive oil. So I've got the resupply number on the top, and then the big number is the number of days food that it has. About. Suddenly, though, it was time to go. Flying from my hometown of Seattle to San Diego was of course a funny experience because in the single plane ride over the course of a couple hours, I was covering most of the distance I would spend the next 5 months walking. The native Luiseño peoples live to the west of where the trail goes mostly, such as what's now called La Jolla, where I spent time before starting my trip on the PCT and in the vicinity of what's now San Diego, where most hikers arrive before beginning a northbound hike. When I looked up the Luiseno, it was quite cool to realize that somebody with La Jolla Luiseno heritage had actually made an impact on me. The late James Luna was a wonderful performance artist whose thought-provoking work made an impact on me when I saw a lecture delivered by him at the Evergreen State College in 2008. I spent time in La Jolla with my mom and my sister visiting our late great-aunt before getting dropped off at the start of the trail. Having a supportive and excited family has always made a big difference, and I'll always be thankful for them. Here we are at the Mexican border. The southern terminus of the Pacific Crest Trail is 2 miles from Campo, a tiny town near the border with Mexico. I have waited so long to be here. I am nervous, excited, and reserved.
Goodbye! Have a good summer!
Mexican border to Warner Springs, 109.6 miles, 9,137 feet of elevation gain.
Alright, here are some of the first trail miles, the first steps on the Pacific Crest Trail. Oh, and that's my pack on the tree. Beautiful Southern California. Oh, my feet feel terrible. Been a good trip, but let's see, I'm gonna have to end it soon. Where am I? Oh, well, I'll keep going. There's definitely gonna be times that I'll wish I had a viewfinder for this thing. It's so bright out, and I just have to look at this little LCD. Starting to get out there now. Probably on mile like 4.5 or so. Lots of little skills to master on this trip, like switching lenses and well, we're out in the hills now. Just met Shauna and Kale. I'll see them at Camp Marina, along with another 3 thru hikers we've seen so far just passing by. It's an interesting challenge, an interesting idea. Bringing the camera into personal moments. Is it still possible to go into a state of no mind with this thing? I don't know. I like the idea of movement and time conflated with image. And the idea of an extension of an experience in the world. Evening of the first day, I met Kyle, trail name of Hornsby. Chatted and hiked for a while. Adjusted my shoes. All is pretty good so far. Just looking for a nice spot to camp, spend the night. It's pretty crazy. The trail came over that ridge and set me down on this power line road for a while, and I was sort of wondering, but oh, we have, look. Well, here we are on day 2. Camped down at Hauser Creek last night, where the creek was supposed to be dry, but there was a water cache. So that was pretty awesome. Last night I slept on really uneven ground, And of course, it was my first real trail night out there, so didn't get very much sleep, but since today is just a 5-mile day, it doesn't really matter. And I'm feeling good. Corridors like this are nice, like runways.
At the kickoff, meeting other prospective thru-hikers and hearing advice from those of previous years was elating, but also immediately felt sort of off.
Here I am at Camp Marina. They even have free showers, but I forgot my soap, so I'm gonna go to the store to get some soap.
The whole thing was a celebration, but I was in no mood to celebrate. I wanted to start and see what would happen when I started moving. And the atmosphere was sobered by the news that someone had just died on the very first stretch of the trail, related to hot and dry conditions. I had never backpacked in the desert before.
Regardless of what you see online or whatever, and hey, it's hiking cool, it's all part of it, no problem. This is serious. It's quite an endeavor that you're doing.
The PCT out of all the national trails has the highest percentage in federally designated wilderness. This is the 50th anniversary of the creation of wilderness, right?
So this whole thing collapsed on me, and I got some big rocks from the river to put under the guy lines, only the main ones facing the wind, and my tent has not been able to stay up in this wind, so yeah. Well, last night was a definite shit show. My tent completely collapsed, just rained and blasted wind everywhere. I think I'm ready to just start on what this trail is all about, which is moving. That's where I want to be.
I finally stepped out of the campground and onto the southern tip of a thread that stretches so many miles beyond sight and is sewn through with so much of my past and future.
So again.
Walking by the side of a random highway, it was easy to get the thought in my head, this is ridiculous. Just walking in Southern California, where I've never been. From Lake Marina, the trail departs the Hauser Wilderness, heads up through the Laguna Mountains, and then back down into the San Felipe Valley before heading up to the San Felipe Hills. Many of these areas overlap with the traditional lands of some of the Indigenous Kumeyaay Peoples, including the Tipai, whose lands share geography with the Laguna Mountains, and the Ipai to the west. Even by the start of the second day on the trail, it was obvious that the 750 miles of so-called desert south of the Sierras would not be some stretch of flat, boring hiking, or really homogeneous in any way. The temperatures and aridity of this land just west of the Colorado desert can mean long gaps between natural water sources.
Kibitz campground was really pretty awesome. I met Meg from Evergreen there, and Laura, who also has a Z-Pax Hexamid Solo Plus, Levels, Jeff. It's probably my ideal day actually, is yesterday where I was alone while walking and then camping and meeting up with people then. It's always a bit awkward, sort of passing and repassing and being passed by people on the trail. It's nice to have a little section to yourself and just not think about anything but your own pace, where you are. Here's the first snow on the trail. I'm just a mile away from Laguna. Probably won't last a day. It's starting to get pretty hot. Now that's some desert way out there. From now on, I'm going to need to be pretty careful about my water and start filling up my full capacity.
In the rush of the beginning, there is so much that floods down. Step after step, image after image. Blind joy mixed with the discomforts and hilarities of adapting to a life of moving on my feet. Caught up in the progression of places as I quickened to walk past crowds of fellow thru-hikers. But of course there were always more ahead and behind. I was one in many.
Sorry, one sec. This little lizard. My God. I'm sitting here in the tiny shade of this one tall rock in the middle of really nowhere. There's just no shade anywhere out there. Woke up at 3 this morning. I've gone for a good, 17 miles or so. Water is in 1 mile, so that will be very nice. Definitely an inhospitable place. I could have to hitch a ride into Julian way down there, Scissors Crossing, if there's no water cache. It could make for a 30-mile waterless stretch, and to think I would have been going into the office on Monday. Here's my secluded little spot, just a little while from Scissors Crossing, about 3.5 miles. Nice and shaded. That's my first 20-miler of the trip. Their feet aren't looking too bad at all, considering. California is pretty interesting. Very different. I love the way the land slides from range to range, stacked up like layers, slices, plates. There's a sense of walking through the landscape. You look at each rock you're stepping over. Try not to twist your ankle on each bend of the path. Sometimes you forget the larger landscape you're in. This is the view from my bench in the Stagecoach RV Park, just southeast of Scissors Crossing. Oh man, when they open I'm just gonna get some coffee. Stare out at this, maybe all day. Well, back on the trail. Big hill today. I keep telling myself I'm not here to get to Third Gate tonight. I'm here to walk across the country, so. I have to wonder how much of this different world I'll remember. All these different forms of life, plants, their textures, their colors, this land, the way they move in the wind, in the desert. Pretty funny, you're walking around out here and you see all the hikers just scrunched into little spaces of shade wherever you can find them. Sparkly. It's nice out. I feel good. These things are fucking sharp. This shit will stab you.
There is a stillness that places me dead center in myself. A pair of eyes linked to the world around me.
Home again, jiggity jig. I should be able to set my tent up here, which is quite nice. God, to think, I could be playing Dark Souls 2. At the RV park, I was resting and recovering from a sour 20-plus mile day, but did another 20 today, and I feel quite good, actually. Yeah, I just gotta take those zeros when I need them, I think, basically. First blood. This kind of place is almost mythic to me, walking down a path like this, the evening or the morning light.
The native Kumeyaay people had their primary villages near where Warner Springs is located today. They survived through multiple waves of Spanish, Mexican, and American colonialism until being evicted by a court ruling in 1903. They are fighting to get their home back to this day.
Just walking around the milk cows. Walking down the road in Warner Springs, just got my resupply package at the post office. Headed back to the community center, which is a pretty cool place that has showers and laundry and stuff all set up for PCT hikers. So yeah, nice little first resupply stop.
Like all you can do with it. Yeah, but actually like try to make fun smaller.
And that's Warner Springs. Great place, met Rock Ocean. Gave me a ride to the store, picked up some liter capacity because my Sawyer bag started leaking, so shit. But sitting in the shade having a little break. It gets pretty damn hot around 10. It even starts at 9 really. Just digging into the miles to Idlewild today, so I don't have to do 220s and not in any rush. Not enough wind today for the bandit style get up, but man, is it hot. Lost Valley Spring, just to give you an idea, I basically just put it in this squeeze pouch and put the squeeze pouch on top of the bottle and then squeeze it in there. It's all filtered. I'm listening to music for the first time and it can just make you, it can make me a lot more emotionally present. I think everything we can do to be more where we are is good.
Warner Springs to Idlewild, 69 miles. 10,200 feet of elevation gain. From Warner Springs, the trail takes you gradually up to the first high elevation mountains on your route across the country, the San Jacintos, and then on to the first true trail town, Idlewild.
Today I'm going to take sort of like a proper siesta, good 4-hour break. Trying to get as much done as I can in the morning. Listen to some Buckethead. No way am I going 14 miles without more water. There's what the spring comes from. There's where I get it.
Sometimes on the trail, you can end up feeling very out of sync.
There's those two hills again.
Out of sync with your body, out of sync with yourself, with where you are. And then you'll suddenly find yourself somewhere, and something might click. And then sometimes you also find yourself in a state of flow, sensitive to everything around you.
How's it going? This valley is definitely more paradise-like than the last one I was in. Last night I camped with OG, Ross, Heather aka Javelin and or Hocus Pocus, and Kevin, now known as Lighthouse. Now I'm on my way to the Paradise Valley Cafe. Desert is pretty cool. I'm starting to get used to it. Although, yeah, still have a ways to go, and I'm hearing whisperings of the Mojave, which is much more desert-like indeed. Well, there's Highway 74. Walking down the alternate side road to Paradise Valley Cafe. Obviously, I'm not the only hiker here.
In 2014, there was a trail closure just north of Paradise Valley Cafe because of the mountain fire. The Pacific Crest Trail Association didn't have any recommended alternates. There were warnings that the road to Idlewild was narrow and not protective for hikers, so I ended up taking a ride from Rock Ocean, who was at the cafe, to Idlewild. Afterwards, I would regret skipping this 18 miles or so of the trail, but I tried to make up for it with side trips along the way, such as the hike up to the top of Mount San Jacinto right after Idlewild. Trail closures because of fire on the Pacific Crest Trail are almost inevitable, and overall I was actually quite lucky that this was the only closure that would affect my continuous walking. Idlewild to Big Bear City, 95.5 miles, 12,307 feet of elevation gain.
Left Idlewild after a 0 day, but a storm came in. Turned out to be still quite cold. I'm not concerned about hiking in almost any condition, but camping, if it's, blasting wind and rain, can be pretty difficult with the tarp tent. It turns out, plan took me to the very top of Mount San Jacinto. Quads are getting super sore. Not the kind of casual first day out I was planning, because I hadn't seen any shelter beforehand. I mean, I'm so glad this is here. This is just amazing. Totally alone. Nobody else was crazy enough to come up here last night when it was snowing.
The native Kumeyaay peoples were and are living in areas the PCT now traverses. Their traditional lands include San Gorgonio Pass, and despite their coordination and cooperation with various Spanish and American endeavors, the U.S. government refused to ratify the treaty that would let them control their lands, which were further chopped up into parcels reserved for the railroad. But Kumeyaay Nation today has many strong communities, thriving in areas in Southern California like Cabazon, Banning, and Palm Springs.
Well, I had a nice snug night in the cabin. Not super comfortable, but definitely warm, and it's definitely nice out this morning. Stepping around on rocks like these are pretty interesting. Going down not only trail to the PCT, but also the most notorious part of the PCT for endless downhill, and probably going to try and just do 15 today, maybe, something like that. I don't know, I'll see how it goes. No tracks. Definitely not the desert walking I was expecting in Southern California. It's Cracker Jack!
Are you making video?
Maybe. That's where I was this morning. Going way down towards the desert. This is certainly drier. This is a badass looking rock. I almost feel like the mountain was an illusion. It's funny, I'm seeing this Indian paintbrush that I'm used to seeing up at Mount Rainier National Park, but apparently it lives in the desert too. I'm getting sucked down, down, down. That's how many miles I've gone, and that's how many I have to go. Makes me a little tired looking at it after a 20-mile day. Of course, the one thing my tent doesn't do so well with is wind, and this is what I'm headed straight for.
Coming down from the San Jacintos, the trail drags you through around 8,000 feet of descent, all the way to the flat floor of San Gorgonio Pass. After San Gorgonio Pass, the PCT crosses the San Andreas Fault and winds its way along the San Bernardino Mountains for quite some time.
In the Winton Valley now. Sound in this valley is pretty ungodly. It's like the deep howling winds, the crackle of the electric lines, and the wind howls every now and then above that. so beautiful overpass. And here are some dirty bikers. And this is called trail magic. It's time to give myself a C-section. I feel like I'm being judged. Thoroughly back to desert hiking now. Had a nice little stop in at Laggy and the Bears after some trail magic under the bridge. You know, not just in a pure warm-up phase anymore. Want to make sure I can go at a nice solid pace. These 95 miles to Big Bear are a perfect chance to really stretch the legs out and see how things go.
Turning the first corners away from Highway 10 into this range was like stepping through a massive door into a sheltered place from the harsh winds of the valley and protected from the huge open desert to the east. The San Bernardino Mountains are part of the traditional lands of the native Serrano peoples.
Official shade patch, number 20 or so. Looks like the best one that I could find. Sometimes I'll get to a spot like this in the desert and take out my phone and look up just exactly where the hell I am with the half-mile app, which is very nice. It's pretty cool.
Other ranges and areas nearby, such as the Tehachapi Mountains ahead on the trail, also share geography with native Serrano land. The climb up Mission Creek was long and hot, but rewarded the hard work with a rolling flat trail for several miles, changing vegetation, and one of the first times you feel like you're truly on the crest.
Got pretty sunburned, so evening it out now. Entering the first light of day. Hope I can get rid of this stream soon so I can pee guilt-free. So I've been going around taking a lot of pictures of these cliffs, reference for game development stuff. Some pretty cool valleys in here. A lot of texture, a lot of form. It's really cool. It'll be a sort of a gold mine for my game development stuff, I think. Let's see. You think you're in one place and then you're in the next. No mile is the same. Nothing can be what you expect it. It'll always be different. This morning I was in a burned desert, basically. Now there's all these pine trees, shade. The weather's not that bad, but man, a ton of uphill today. What a climb. I'm psyched to be on these flat rolling hills. Yeah, I think my metabolism has kicked up a notch. These pieces of tree bark are sort of looking like beef jerky because my hip belt was just mashing all my poop in my intestines. It's much better to let the intestines breathe a little bit. This past mile or so, I've just felt like I'm floating.
Getting to a long, rolling, flat ridge line after miles of hard uphill in the heat can really feel amazing. And then as the views unfold near the end of the day, all you have to worry about is where you're going to camp that night. Hopefully a flat, soft place on a ridge, looking back at where you came from that morning. And on to where you'll go the next day. And you'll eat hot food as you watch the sun leave the landscape.
I finally feel like I'm on the PCT. I don't know who I'm going to run into anymore. It's starting to get a little bit more spread out. I much prefer it that way, where you're out there and it's more of a surprise every social interaction. It just gives it much more of a sense of mystery. I wasn't expecting my first bear encounter on the PCT to be quite like this. Alright, so I'm near Ank's summit, getting pretty close to Big Bear, and I stumbled across this. PCT magic? Well, what could that be? Oh, yes. And I mean, having a sofa is pretty awesome. The sofa is pretty unbelievably comfortable.
By the time I reached Big Bear Lake, I knew something was going wrong. I'd begun to accept a pace of constant acceleration, bouncing off other hikers and propelling myself as fast as I could ahead on the trail. My knees and ankles were killing me. I couldn't just slow down, but I knew I had to rest or I would compromise the trip. I took a break at Big Bear Lake, where I picked up a knee brace to help with the pain I was experiencing, and of course, consumed as much food as humanly possible.
Here we are at Big Bear Hostel. I spent 2 nights. And now we're all getting ready to go and head out to the trail again. Hello.
Hello.
How do you like those pancakes?
It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Topo started making pancakes for everybody, which was much appreciated. It's been a pretty cool place to spend 2 nights in town. All right, back on the trail after Big Bear. A nice place to rest for a couple of days for sure. Looking forward to some pretty easy miles, I think, to start off. As with every resupply, all my stuff weighs a ton now. 5 days of food, and it's a big difference. It's weird, I'm definitely at like a psychological low in some ways at this point. In Big Bear, I picked up a different kind of knee brace, and I just spent the past 20 minutes putting it in different arrangements, and the constant stress of trying to like think about what I need to do, and then seeing all these people on the trail going on their own way, and you know, your mind inevitably tries to compare yourself with them, and it makes you think, oh yeah, you gotta get going, boy. Even though you really don't. I really want to just love the world that I'm in. And you know, it's hard to get rid of your thoughts. You know, I really have wanted to do this since I was like 14 or 15 years old. That just adds a lot of psychological tension when you start to think too much about things going wrong and can I even do this? Listening to more of the not West right now music that I once listened to when I was sitting alone, playing World of Warcraft, and aware of something else was out there and something was beyond me. And I wanted to be outside of myself and feeling still at the same time, that melancholy. And that music it's sort of like stitching together those two different parts of my life. That's one of my favorite ways really of disconnectedly interacting with people, which is something I've done for my whole life in video games, but I think one of the more important ways I do it is in music. I think most people do. It might be Baldwin actually, I think that is Baldwin. It's totally dry. There's one thing I know, it's important to keep walking. Walking doesn't mean walking on the PCT necessarily, but just walking through the field of your thoughts and letting them all go by, making and walking. That's what I want to do. It's not just why I want to be here, it's why I want to be.